My first guest today, and the first ever guest for Chat with Matt as well, actually, is a bus driver and an author, and his latest book is Fife Buses From Alexanders, Fife to Stagecoach, which details the history of buses throughout Fife from the 1960s, where it was the then state-owned Fife Scottish, to the present-day privateer that is now Stagecoach. It's mainly told in pictures, because they say pictures speaks louder than words, and what we want to know is how that creates the nostalgic feel and kind of captures what Dunfermline was like in years gone by. And, well, we're going to speak to Walter about that just now. So, Walter, welcome to Radio West Fife.
Thank you very much.
So just tell us about the book itself. Explain about the Fife Buses book and how were you inspired to write the book?
The book actually came about because of model buses, believe it or not. Mm-hmm. I was into the model buses. If there was a specific model out by EFE Corgi, I would strip the paint off and repaint them to Fife colours. Mm-hmm. But at that time I didn't know fleet numbers, registration numbers and so on. So I created a website to get all this database together. Mm-hmm. And it grew into what's now fifescottish.com.
Oh yes.
Which is a popular website. The publishers were researching on the Scottish Bus Group and came across the website and asked me if I'd be interested in writing about Fife's buses. Mm-hmm. The specific dates being, as you mentioned, from the early 60s to when Stagecoach took over.
Stage took over in the early 90s, of course.
Yeah.
And just so, did you even have any consideration of writing a book before that, or was it just one of these things that you would like to do, but you would never think you'd get the opportunity to do it?
Well, I've always been perplexed at the fact that of all the bus books out there was nothing about Fife in particular. Mm-hmm. There's been books out about Alexanders, which has covered Fife to a degree, Northern and Midland, the old operating areas of the Walter Alexander's empire. But when the opportunity came to do a book, I grabbed it with both hands, obviously, for the reasons I've just pointed out. And as it's proved, it's been quite a popular subject to cover because, as I say, it's never been covered before in its own sort of entirety, just Fife. Mm-hmm.
And of course, can you just give us maybe a very brief history of how Alexanders became Stagecoach of today? Because you did mention the reference to Alexanders just very, very briefly. Yeah, well,
from the 1920s, 1930s, Walter Alexander started off in Falkirk. They just grew and grew, absorbing companies until they managed to get a foothold in Fife once they got the Reims traction companies, buses, and the old Dunfermline traction companies, buses. The company was at one time vying with Midland down in England to become the biggest bus operator out with London.
All right.
I think that it became too much for Alexanders, and they decided to split into the three companies, more manageable sort of operating areas. So it's hard to explain because of the difference of interests through the government in the buses, how it all became from Alexander's Fife into Fife Scottish, when all the bus companies sort of came under the same umbrella. So I think that was just like getting ready for privatisation, really.
So it was like the long, slow step towards privatisation. And obviously, it sounds like it was a very complex...
It was very complex. It was so hard for me to understand it at times myself. That's why in the book I've tried to lay it out in much easier sort of terms. I've not wanted to sort of bother everyone with the British Transport Commission and all these sort of things that people aren't really interested in.
Yes,
they just want to know about Fife's buses, and that's what I've tried to do.
And of course, just looking through the book, and in the run up to this interview, I've been sort of looking through the book, and it's just amazing to see some of these pictures. Not necessarily about the buses per se, but it's more of the fact that was a snapshot of history and time and local history. So could you tell us where and how did you manage to obtain all these photos?
Well, I had a lot of the images on my website to begin with, but I've got a lot of friends, bus enthusiasts, who provided a lot of the images for the book. They were only too happy because they'd love to see their images in print. But a lot of them, my good friend Robert Dixon through in Stirling, as you pointed out, he wasn't taking pictures of posed images of just buses. He was capturing a bit of the background, maybe something going on, maybe a specific building that isn't there anymore, something getting built or something interesting in the background, and that's what I wanted to relay in the book, as well as just a picture of a specific bus. I wanted to show a bit of history, if you know what I'm
a bit of local history.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly. Yeah.
I mean, for someone like myself, who will admit to being of a showbiz age of 21, that seeing these photos, you do get a real eye opener to see. Probably how I wouldn't say how empty Dunfermline was, but how smaller and less full than it is today.
Yeah.
And just looking through some of these photos, obviously, when you've looked at some of these photos, surely that must have maybe evoked some of your own personal memories of what Dunfermline used to be like.
It has, actually. I think that was my main focus, was what I can remember as a boy, the half cab buses with the doors at the back. Conductresses, these sort of things that you don't get anymore. Fair enough, I'm a bus driver nowadays, but buses now aren't the same as they used to be. There's too many circuits and stuff. They're so easy to drive, where in the old days they were more interesting. There was more about them. There was a bit of character. As I say, because they had like conductresses and so on as well. My sister was a conductress on the buses. That sort of through it a wee bit as well.
So there's a wee bit of a family connection with that kind of...
a wee bit, yeah.
Now that kind of thing. And you did say in your kind of synopsis that you don't just want to appeal to the sort of local bus enthusiasts, and there is quite a lot of specialist knowledge in here. I mean, I'm no expert on buses. I couldn't probably tell you the difference between a National Mark IIS and a National Mark II, but what I could probably tell you is that the other side, as you said, you want to appeal to the nostalgic side of things. So apart from the sort of picture side of things, how were you trying to appeal to that market as well, to try and get that balance?
Well, wherever possible, I've tried to include the bus type, the bus fleet number or registration number, because the fleet numbers changed periodically when vehicles maybe moved between depots, or when the bus company changed from Fife Scottish to the large logo Fife Scottish. The fleet numbers changed totally.
Yeah.
I was just trying to appease the people who were more interested in the nuts and bolts side, as well as the sort of local interest side of it as well. I try to do both sides of the coins.
Try and juggle both ends of it, kind of thing. But do you see this as a kind of a historical document in a way, that it's a collection of photos and things that we can all just access at one particular time?
To a degree, yeah, but there's actually another book coming out in November. It's Kirkcaldy in Central Fife's trams and buses, which goes back to the early days. But next spring, I'm led to believe, I'll have Dunfermline and West Fife's trams and buses, which is covering from the early part of the 1900s right to the present day. It's not just covering this 30-year period when the buses were red and cream. So there's going to be a bit more in-depth about the Dunfermline area when that comes out next year.
Fantastic. And you did mention that you were a bus driver yourself, how has that helped you writing the book? Did it give you maybe a more detailed insights into the sort of the bus's heritage and so forth?
It did to a degree. I had a better understanding about how buses run their routes, why buses run specific routes, times, try to keep the times. Just everything's sort of at the back of my mind. How can I put it? It's hard to explain because there's so much. I try to get everything crammed into the one little story, and so it's hard to explain.
It's hard to explain, of course.
No,
that's not a problem at all. I mean, sometimes there are things that you just can't put your finger on what exactly it is. But
exactly, yeah.
But it's that particular thing. Now, we obviously throughout the book we go through around the 60s and the sort of 70s where it was Alexanders and then became Fife Scottish. But as we go further into the book, we begin to see a little bit more of the early stages of the privatisation of the bus services. So how significant was the idea of privatising what was effectively a state-owned company?
Well, I believe at the time, because I wasn't actually a bus driver at that time, I know that there was a lot of unrest, strikes and so on. People thought it would be the end of the bus companies as they knew it. There would be massive cuts, and it didn't really affect Fife to a great degree, I'm glad to say, in the long run, because you only really had Fife operating in the era. Rennie's came into the fold to a degree for a little while, but because of the competition from Stagecoach at the time, Rennie's soon came off the road, so to speak.
And of course, that led to the Stagecoach taking over Fife Scottish in the early 90s.
Right, that's right, yeah.
And now it's effectively a single bus operator. So in your personal view, do you think the privatisation of the Fife bus services was a good idea, or was it something that they could have maybe avoided?
Again, it's hard to answer that, because I never really noticed any change when it sort of happened. I don't think there was anything like major route changes, routes coming off of it. I don't think any of that really happened. It just seemed to be a smooth transition from being Fife Scottish to Stagecoach, and it's just plodded on ever since. You know, the buses are there when they're needed, or if the route capacity hasn't been there, they've maybe altered routes or whatever. But nothing's really changed.
Nothing's changed at all.
Nothing. They had a bit of a set to a couple of years back where I think it was Steel End, but public demand and all that, seeing the buses back. So
it's all that kind of stuff.
But I can see the point from the Stagecoach want to take buses off if they're not.
If they're not making money, then there's no point running them, of course. And you did mention briefly where to next. So you've got a couple of books in the pipeline, as you said.
Yeah.
And where can we? And whilst we wait for those two books, which is about the Kirkcaldy trams and eventually the Dunfermline trams next year, where can we buy this book if we don't get the opportunity to enter our competition in just a little minute?
You'll get, just like the Fife buses, but you'll get them in all the good bookshops round about Dunfermline, West Fife area. For the Dunfermline one, you'll probably have to go to Kirkcaldy maybe for the Kirkcaldy one. I don't know how the publisher's actually going to play that one, seeing as it's broken down into certain areas now.
I see.
But you'll get them on Amazon, W.H. Smith, online.
All the sort of usual places.
The usual places, yeah.
Walter, thanks very much for coming into.
My pleasure.
Thanks.
My pleasure. Thanks very much.
Thanks very much. And that was Walter Burt there, talking about Fife buses and his book, of course, Fife Buses From Alexanders, Fife to Stagecoach.